Greetings. I am Emma Dawson, age 23. You may question how someone of my age finds herself living with a cousin rather than in her own place. Believe me, this was not part of any plan I had envisioned for myself. I am pursuing a career in architecture, dedicating most of my time to sketching designs, working on presentations, and managing freelance projects. Life has not always been easy since my parents' separation. As a teenager, I moved frequently, seeking stability amid the chaos. Eventually, I found myself living with my cousin David in Glenwood. The move was unplanned. Circumstances changed when my mother accepted a demanding job out of state, leaving me in need of a temporary home while I completed my degree. David, my cousin, was the only family member willing and able to provide me with a place to stay. David had been married to his wife Lillian for several years. They lived in a charming home on the outskirts of town, far removed from the city's noise. I had expected this relocation to be just like the others, a quiet and peaceful chapter in an otherwise hectic life, but reality turned out to be far more complicated. This brings us to the present. Several months have passed since my move, and I've grown accustomed to this environment. I thought I had adjusted to the calm and mundane rhythm of life here, but today feels different. I am writing this because something happened, an event that began when I stepped into David's room while he was resting. Before I delve into the details, let me tell you more about David. David has always been more than just a cousin to me. He has played the role of a mentor rather than merely a relative. Growing up, he taught me how to navigate challenges, like repairing my bike and building my first model project. For my 18th birthday, David surprised me with an incredible sketching set, something I had wished for all year. So, when my mother needed a place for me during her work relocation, he was the obvious choice. He's not the type of relative who only sends greetings during the holidays. He has always been present when it matters. Although David is thoughtful, patient, and generous, living with him also meant living with Lillian. She and David had been married for nearly 3 years. Initially, I was wary of Lillian. She was older than David, with a distant and poised demeanor that made it hard to feel included in their world. I was given a guest room at the far end of the house, and I did my best to keep to myself, respecting their space and privacy. However, the tension between Lillian and me gradually eased. She began sharing tips about cooking, home management, and even small lifestyle tricks. Though our relationship wasn't as close as mine with David, the distance between us shrank over time, making daily life more harmonious, until everything changed. My rapport with Lillian was never as close as with David. However, the unease between us had eased, and our interactions became more cordial. Life in the house gradually returned to a predictable normalcy over the past few months. My connection with David deepened. His presence felt like a constant anchor. He listened without judgment, always patient and understanding. Most evenings, we would sit together after dinner, sometimes exchanging stories, sometimes simply enjoying the quiet as music played softly in the background. Lately, I've noticed something unsettling, an indefinable shift in our interactions. What began as fleeting moments of comfort slowly evolved into something stronger, something more confusing. The way his laughter lingered in the air, the brush of his hand when we reached for the same glass, the way he glanced at me when he thought I wasn't looking. It all felt different. It's difficult to explain, yet impossible to ignore. I was uncertain whether he sensed it too, but I could feel a subtle tension building between us, like an undercurrent beneath still waters. You may wonder, Emma, what are you saying? He is your cousin. I acknowledge how absurd it sounds, and yet this emotion, this inexplicable pull, refused to be dismissed. I tried convincing myself it was just my imagination, a harmless longing for closeness. But every time we were alone, the air between us seemed heavier, as though an invisible force drew us nearer. This brings me to the present moment. The evening had passed quietly. After dinner, I returned to my room to work on a design draft. David had gone to bed early and Lillian was away at an overnight conference. I became absorbed in my work until a sound in the hallway pulled me from my focus. Soft, deliberate footsteps. At first I ignored it, but when I heard the subtle creak of his door opening, I froze. My mind raced with indecision. Should I check in on him or leave him to rest? My curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to speak with him, perhaps to unravel the silent questions lingering between us. I quietly opened the door, careful not to make a sound. There he lay, his arm draped behind his head, his features calm and relaxed in sleep. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting faint shadows across his face, illuminating the contours of his jawline with an ethereal softness. My breath hitched as my heart thudded in my chest. I felt warmth rise to my cheeks as I stood there, immobile, overwhelmed by emotions I didn't understand. I wasn't sure what I wanted. Was it simply to watch him in this serene moment, or was it something more profound, something I couldn't name? I wasn't sure how long I remained there, lost in thought, until I accidentally nudged a small figurine on the shelf. It toppled and hit the floor with a soft clatter. David stirred, his eyes fluttering open as his gaze locked onto mine. For a second, confusion clouded his face, but beneath that bewilderment there was something else, something unspoken that I could not decipher. He blinked several times, trying to focus on me, then let out a soft, sleepy laugh. "Emma, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice still heavy with drowsiness. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to find something to say. I didn't want to seem intrusive, but I had no idea how to explain myself. My mouth felt dry, and every thought vanished from my mind. "I didn't mean to disturb your sleep," I stammered, feeling a sudden wave of embarrassment wash over me. David slowly sat up, rubbing his eyes gently. He looked at me with the same gentle smile as always, but this time there was something different in his eyes that made my heart race even more. He paused for a moment as though observing me more closely, and then spoke. "It's okay." His voice was softer than usual. "Mel, you can always talk to me whenever you need to." I nodded, but inside it felt like a whirlwind I didn't know how to control. The storm of emotions brewing in my chest. The air in the room grew heavier, and I noticed my breathing becoming more rapid. "I just wanted to talk," I whispered, my voice weak but sincere. David's smile faded slightly, and a flicker of hesitation appeared in his eyes before disappearing just as quickly. "Come here," he said in his calm, warm tone. "You can tell me anything." I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do next, but something inside me urged me forward. Before I could think twice, I walked over and sat down beside him. The room seemed to shrink, and the tension between us became more palpable than ever. I could feel the warmth radiating from his body next to mine, and catch the familiar, subtle scent of him lingering in the air. We were so close that I could hear his steady breathing and see his chest rise and fall with each breath. My heart pounded again, as though it was trying to escape my rib cage. I slowly looked up at him. Our faces were so close that I could feel his warmth radiating toward me. His gaze was soft, but tinged with uncertainty, and in that gaze, there was something that sent a shiver across my skin. His voice was soft, as though trying to stop me from saying anything else. His lips parted slightly, but I instinctively leaned in closer. My face felt flushed, and the sound of my heartbeat echoed loudly in my ears. What am I doing? What is happening between us? I couldn't name the emotions coursing through me, but everything inside me felt as though it was on fire, powerful and impossible to control. David remained still, his eyes fixed on me with a quiet intensity that mirrored my own inner turmoil. He was silent, but I could feel his breathing becoming as quick as mine. The room suddenly felt warmer, as though the air between us had shifted. The silence was thick with unspoken emotions. My mind was overwhelmed with countless thoughts, none of which were clear enough to hold me back. Everything seemed to lead to this moment, an unexpected and inexplicable moment. I felt myself losing control. I leaned in, my lips trembling as they brushed against his. His lips met mine with tenderness yet strength. Like a wave of emotions I couldn't hold back. A part of me screamed to stop, to pull away, but my body refused. I needed this. I craved this, though I feared what I was diving into. Stop avoiding it, a thought whispered in my mind. His hands gently cupped my face, his warm fingers brushing over my skin as though pulling me closer. His other hand rested lightly on the edge of the bed, and when his fingertips grazed my arm, a warmth spread through me like a flame. That touch felt like a spark, waking every part of me in a way stronger than reason. The kiss deepened, blurring the line between him and me. Nothing existed beyond this room. No outside world, no time. It was just us, trapped in an inescapable whirlpool of emotions. In my head, a flood of mixed feelings surged, confusion, guilt, and even a faint glimmer of hope. What are we doing? Why? I couldn't put it into words, but the feeling was so overwhelming that logic no longer mattered. He pulled away from my lips slightly, his forehead resting gently against mine. Both of us were breathing heavily, our gasps mingling as one. My heart pounded so fiercely that I thought he could hear it. "Emma," he whispered, his voice laden with emotion, "we shouldn't be doing this." His voice trembled, as though he too was fighting a battle with his own reason. I wasn't sure whether I agreed or not. A force inside me urged that rules were meant to be broken. I gently grasped his hand, our fingers intertwining as though seeking reassurance. He didn't pull away. Instead, he held my hand tightly, as if afraid that letting go would make everything fall apart. We stared at each other for a long moment in silence, a silence that carried all the words we couldn't say. The weight of what had just happened between us hung in the air. An unspoken question lingered. Should we continue? I let my hand brush the back of his neck, drawing him closer. This time, I felt no hesitation or fear. There was no more distance, no more uncertainty. I needed this closeness, needed to feel his presence again. His hand slid down my back, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. All that remained was our rapid breathing and the unspoken understanding between us. I didn't know where this was going, but at that moment, the only thing that mattered was that fleeting moment, a moment I didn't want to let go of, where the world outside became blurred and only the two of us existed in this small universe. The room seemed to shrink, the air between us thick with an unnameable swirl of emotions. David's breath brushed softly against my ears, sending shivers down my spine. I wasn't sure if it was from the tension or if the closeness was simply overwhelming. For the first time in my life, I felt a connection so profound, both intense and conflicting. "Are you sure?" he murmured, his voice husky but filled with hesitation. "I don't want to hurt you." I closed my eyes, trying to rein in the turbulent thoughts flooding my mind. Everything inside me was at war. My reason told me to step back, to end it here before things spiraled out of control. But my emotions wouldn't yield. They burned like a fire, and I realized I could no longer deny myself. "I'm sure," I whispered, my voice trembling but sincere. I felt the warmth of his hand as it slid over my shoulder, down to my chest, rising and falling with each shallow breath. My heart pounded so hard that it felt like it was about to burst. David gazed into my eyes once more, as though searching for a sign that I wasn't making a mistake. His eyes were filled with emotions hard to describe, a longing for closeness and a burden of invisible responsibility. When his lips found mine again, the world around us seemed to dissolve. Time disappeared. No sounds from the outside world could reach us. It was just us, wrapped in a moment I knew would be etched in my memory forever. But just as everything seemed to still, a sound echoed from downstairs. The front door opened and closed hurriedly, letting in a chill from outside. I froze, my senses suddenly heightened. "David?" Lillian's voice called out. Not loud, but enough to make the air in the room turn cold as ice. My heart plummeted. I quickly stood up, guilt flooding every part of me. I tried to steady my breathing, but I couldn't control the wild thudding in my chest. David remained seated on the bed, his gaze distant, as if clinging to the last fragments of calm. I looked at him, but he simply lowered his head, his hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the bed. The way he stayed silent told me he was struggling with the same fear I felt. The sound of Lillian's footsteps echoed steadily up the stairs, like the ominous knock of fate. The door creaked open slowly, and Lillian stepped inside with an unsettling calmness. Her eyes swept across the room. In that moment, she didn't need to ask to understand everything. Lillian's eyes held a pain deeper than anger, a pain I could do nothing to ease. David, Emma, what is going on here? Lillian spoke, her voice soft but weighted like a dagger piercing through my mind. The words caught in my throat. I wanted to explain, but I didn't know where to begin. I lowered my gaze, my hands clenched tightly in shame. David remained motionless, his hand reaching up to rub the back of his neck, a reflex whenever he didn't know how to face a situation. Lillian looked at him, her eyes searching for an answer he couldn't give. Emma, Lillian called my name, but there was no reproach in her voice. Her tone was heavy but not filled with resentment that made me feel even more guilty than before. I had braced myself for a storm of anger, but instead I found a silence so deep it felt like an abyss. I know things aren't as simple as I thought, Lillian continued, her gaze softening, but there are things you don't fully understand. I looked at her, bewildered. She didn't ask anything more. She just looked at us with calm but sorrowful eyes, a strange serenity, as though she had been prepared for this moment for a long time. David remained silent, his eyes filled with a nameless regret. The room was weighed down by an oppressive quiet, but I knew that from this moment on, nothing could return to the way it had been. Lillian wasn't abandoning us. She was giving us a chance, a fragile and ambiguous chance, but a chance nonetheless. I glanced at David. His face was a blend of remorse, confusion, and an emotion that was impossible to name. He avoided my gaze, his hands fidgeting nervously. I understood that he was carrying the burden of this tangled connection, one neither of us had ever wished for. Upon reflection, I realized that none of this had been deliberate. Everything had happened beyond our control. The only certainty was that we couldn't ignore it or pretend it hadn't happened. Lillian was right. These emotions and this chaos needed to be confronted and resolved. What do we do next, David? I asked softly, my voice trembling but sincere. David looked up at me, his eyes glistening with inner conflict. I don't know, Emma. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel. Am I supposed to feel angry, ashamed, or do I even have the right to feel anything at all? His voice was frail, filled with the weight of the emotional battle raging inside him. He was a man caught between the profound bond we had built and his devotion to Lillian, who had always stood by his side. I knew we couldn't solve this with just one conversation. The situation was too complex. I took a deep breath and stepped closer to him. The distance between us gradually shrank. I wanted to place a hand on his shoulder to comfort him, but I wasn't sure if that was appropriate. I no longer knew what was right or wrong. I don't think we can resolve everything right now, I said gently but firmly. But we need to have an honest conversation about this. It's too complicated to avoid. His face grew serious, though not cold. He nodded, his voice softening but still tinged with sadness. I understand, but I don't know where to start. I took another step forward, my heart pounding, though my voice remained calm. We start by acknowledging what happened, by admitting our true feelings. Then we'll figure out what steps to take next. David nodded again, his gaze softening slightly, as though he had found a small glimmer of light in the chaos. This won't be easy, Emma, but with loss in our thoughts, trying to make sense of the complexity surrounding us. I am what will happen next, but I'm not going to run from this anymore. We remained silent for a minute, but with loss in our thoughts, trying to make sense of the complexity surrounding us. There was no path laid out for us, no guide to navigate the maze of emotions, regret, and uncertainty. But Lillian had handed us a lifeline, not immediate forgiveness, but permission to face reality and untangle the mess we had created. I looked at David once more. Our eyes met in a moment of mutual understanding, and in that moment I realized that whatever happened next, we would face it with honesty, not avoidance. There was no perfect solution or easy way out, but there was still a chance for healing, for understanding, and maybe even for something better. I sank into the chair, my mind swirling with countless thoughts. Lillian's image filled my head, her eerie calmness like a key that unlocked a door I had never known existed. She hadn't abandoned us. She hadn't condemned us. Instead, she had given us the space to face reality and uncover the truth behind our tangled emotions. But what would happen next? If we confessed everything we felt, would it be too much to bear? Would Lillian ever truly forgive us? Those questions lingered, but I knew they belonged to the future. For now, it was just David and me, sitting in a silence that was both awkward and grounded in reality. We both knew that nothing could ever go back to the way it was. The only way was forward, no matter where that path led. And together, we would find the answers.